very hard to exaggerate the impact that Jesus has had on the world for the past 20 centuries. Jesus is probably the most well-known person who ever lived, which is very peculiar in the sense that he had a public ministry that lasted only 2 to 3 years. He never did any traveling. He had no positions, or held no positions of importance. He was not widely known even in his own day. But since then, of course, he's been a figure who's really bigger than life. One could argue that no one has been depicted more in art than Jesus has. The church is responsible for inspiring a vast outpouring of religious art, beginning with the pictures that were painted on the walls of the catacombs by the first Christians, and then subsequently the great ages of faith during the Middle Ages and even beyond. And again, no one knows how Jesus looked until maybe the Shroud of Turin came out. It's all a mystery. We don't have any physical description of him. There have been more books written about Jesus than probably any other subject except the subject of God himself. This is reflected in the great library in Paris, which is a mirror of Western civilization. In one 100-year period, there were 2 books written every day, 7 days a week, for all 100 years about Jesus. Since the invention of the printing press, the number of commentaries and attempts to exhaust his life and make sense of what he did and what he stands for today continues. And there's much more work to be done because Jesus is, well, quite simply God came into this world. The world is a tiny ball spinning around in vast abyss of space. Think that God himself would enter into this world, the world in which we live today, the same type of world. Yes, we've developed some technology and so forth since 2,000 years have gone by, but it's the same world with its difficulties and challenges, with life and death, families, all the things that are such elements of daily living. It was into this world that God himself descended. If an artist could become part of his own canvas, his own painting, it would not do justice to what God himself has done. Sometimes people have issues with God. I run into this, but not infrequently. They have axes to grind. They don't understand why God does this or that, or why certain aspects of their life are not what they think they ought to be. On the other hand, they seem to have an affinity for Jesus. What people are really missing is what St. Paul said, that if God is for us, who can be against us? God who did not spare his only begotten Son. The point of the matter is that God, the Father, and Jesus are both together. They're not working at odds with each other. Jesus himself is the physical expression of God's love for the world. We have to embrace that. If we don't embrace that, then we're not really living the Christian life. We're living as non-Christians who really don't understand because they have not been exposed to the revelation. God entered into this world of time and space, this world of mortality. We have to think about these things. And of course, the big question being, well, why did God do this? Of course he did it because he was on a mission to rescue a fallen world, a world that he made. If you read the Bible, look at the word world, you'll note that it has a couple of different meanings, one of which is, world is a good place because God made it. But the world can also be defined as a place where people resist God, a place of sin and death. And this is the world that the Lord chose not to destroy, but to save. World of men and women and children, the world of things. this world, Lord entered into it so as to give it a new life. This is what redemption means. Jesus himself had many challenges to face. He had a ministry that was very brief, and it was brief because many people didn't like him. They were upset with the fact that he was offering something that they themselves couldn't understand, or perhaps wrote off as being outside of their experience or desires. Some people were envious of him. Certain members of the establishment of the day saw Jesus as a threat. You visit Bethlehem today, which I was very privileged to visit some years ago. You go downstairs underneath the floor of the Church of the Nativity, which is one of the oldest churches around. There is a marble pavement on top of which there is a 14-pointed star that marks the purported place of Jesus' birth. Why 14 points? Because each point stands for one stop along the way of the stations of the cross. That this child came into Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, became a man, and offered himself for the salvation of the world by voluntarily giving himself as a sacrifice, died on the cross. And then Jesus rose from the dead. The point of the matter is that Jesus is alive today. When I celebrated Mass in Bethlehem, I was in another room separated by one wall from the spot where Jesus was born. Yet I could look into my hands and see Jesus. What was I looking at? I was looking at the consecrated host. The moral of the story is that every Mass is a Bethlehem. Jesus continues to come into this world today. He chooses to do so in a very humble way, because God is very humble. He's quiet. We can miss him. We need to see and discern the signs that he gives of himself. 2,000 years ago, it was that of a baby. Now we see the priest holding up the host and the chalice. These are forms or modes of the presence of our Lord among us today. Why does Jesus do this? Because he wants to form us into his church, his new family, his family of faith. We live in a society that's very prone to individualism. Many people decide that they don't need any other person. They can do it on their own. This is not how we were made as human beings. We need other people. We need their support, and they need us. Jesus recognized that. But Jesus brought together people. In fact, the largest organization in the world today is the Catholic Church, which goes back to the original community that Jesus inspired founded. Jesus wants us to be his family. He wants also the family to expand, which is why our faith is too important to keep to ourselves. There are many people in our society who were never trained in the faith. They don't know much about God or religion or Jesus or the church, sometimes through no fault of their own. We may work with people. I continually hear stories from people in the parish who say that they're the only practicing Catholics or Christians in their work environment. Sometimes they speak about it with a kind of spirit of frustration because they receive no support from anyone. But all the more reason to live our faith, because people need to see the signs of God's love and presence today. Jesus will not come down on a cloud. He works instead through his people. Very important for us to live our faith. Anyone who is not baptized should think of coming into the church, receiving baptism, and living this life that Jesus promises to people, a full life, a life of hope, a life ultimately that will end not in death, but will be a life that will see resurrection of the body after death if we're faithful to it. If we are baptized, we belong to the church and live the faith. The worst thing a Catholic can do is not to live the faith and to give a counter witness to other people. The world needs to see signs of hope, life, love, forgiveness, and peace. The world needs to see people who represent the influence and impact of God. The world needs to see Jesus today through people who are connected with him. That means all of us. Everybody has an impact on other people, even when we don't think that we do. We all do. We influence so many people. We need to influence them for the good. We need to build up what Jesus started. We need to give people reasons for hope. We need to make Jesus present today. As Catholic people, the high point of our week should be Sunday. Sunday is the day Jesus rose from the dead. Every Sunday. Live from Sunday to Sunday. Come to Mass. Renew our faith. When we make the creed on Sundays, we're renewing our baptismal promises. Then we can go out into the world and make a real difference so that Jesus' influence is not lost on our culture. Our culture is losing faith. It has been for a long time. It can be recovered, but we need to do our part.